I'm Kate Coleman. I will be moderating this session, but with our wonderful panel, I think they probably will not need much moderating. They've got it taken care of. First, I want to thank our sustaining and champion sponsors, with whom we would not be able to have this great conference that we've got. So, thanks to Unique, Stat Courier, Midwest Tape, Equinox Open Library Initiative, and Evergreen Collaborative Development Initiative, or ECDI. Just a note that closed captioning is available down at the bottom of the screen with the little CC button. And also, this presentation is being recorded, and recordings and slides will be available soon after the conference. Now, to introduce our program, Inclusive Cataloging, One Step at a Time, with quite the panel of presenters. We've got Katie Greenleaf Martin, the Executive Director of PaILS, Jacob Ingalls, a copy cataloger from Albright Memorial Library, PaILS Library, Matthew Vasquez Jaquith, a technical services supervisor for the Springfield City Library. I believe that's CW Mars. And Carol Witt, also from CW Mars, is the Bibliographic Services Supervisor. And last, but certainly not least, is Jennifer Weston, an education manager with Equinox Open Library Initiative. I can't wait to hear this program. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, Kate. I appreciate it. And of course, thanks to our sponsors. I'm going to do just a little bit of introduction here about how it was that the panel came together. And then I will turn it over to our fine folks here to talk about all the projects that they have done. And then hopefully we will have plenty of time for discussion so that we can all chat together about some of the things that we would like to do, some of the things that we've tried, some of the, things that have worked really well, and some of the things that we've had trouble getting off the ground. So I wanted to start with a quote, and there are several versions of this quote, and the sourcing is not always super clear, but I picked the Patanjali version because I'm a big fan of yoga. So the longest journey begins with a single step. The similar quote is Lao Tzu, which is the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But this is really about equal parts celebration and humility. So this is, some things that we are trying to improve inclusivity of various communities and types of representation in our Evergreen catalogs. And while each project that we're going to talk about today is cool, none of them represent an end-all, be-all, or a finished journey. They all represent one thing that one of us or multiple of us did to try to go and start or continue this journey. So we're going to have folks from different consortia, as we heard during the introduction, as well as Jennifer kind of holding down the service provider end to talk about what we've done and how we pulled it off. So we're excited to share some things from you and hopefully have some really good discussion later as well. Please, I can see the chat over here, so if you see me looking to my left, I'm just looking at the chat. And Carol, yes, if you can PM Gina, private message Gina Monti, we will try to get that working. I'm surprised that it won't let you join without just with audio, but Ring Sentinel is not my wheelhouse. So I am going to continue on, and hopefully we will get Carol set up prior to her slides. So, as I said, what I'm going to do is just welcome everybody and thank these folks for being here. This was something that conversations that we've been having in primarily our cataloging user group committee. We have a really active, in my opinion, cataloging user group committee, and particularly in the last 2 years, they've really started I won't say pushing us, but bringing the PaILS staff projects that they're interested in, that they really want to see done. So that's really exciting for us to have that be community driven. And so starting with those conversations and then coming to I'm a part-time interloper at the cataloging interest group, talking about Evergreen presentations and hearing about some of the other things that folks are doing elsewhere in Evergreen land, and just was able to get an interesting group of folks together to talk about what we're doing. So I'm really excited to hear from each of them. And then this is my very formal agenda here. So I'm talking about what we're doing. We're going to have a couple of slides from each presenter for us to talk about our particular interests. And then we'll have a couple slides of sort of pre-formulated questions. And then we'll move into discussion time. So first up, Jacob Ingalls, and I will say that Jacob was the first person to say the word homosaurus to me, and since then I've gotten to say it a lot more, and I love it every single time because it's just really fun to say. So I will hand it over to you, Jacob.
Thank you very much, Katie. So I wanted to talk today a bit about my project, and to call it a project feels misleading because it's definitely an ongoing thing, and probably ongoing eternally into the future. But introducing the Homosaurus into the Spark catalog. The Homosaurus exists as a complementary subject heading vocabulary designed to describe the experiences of the LGBTQ plus community. The Homosaurus works alongside other thesauri, in our case, chiefly the Library of Congress subject headings, in order to expand the descriptive worlds of the subject headings. It started back in 1997, kind of just as a document with a list of terms. That was primarily the work of Jack van der Velde, a Dutch cataloger. It became a hierarchical vocabulary around 2013 with the collaboration between Jack and Ellen Greenblatt. Around 2015, it became a linked vocabulary with the work of Jack and KJ Ralston, who also worked to establish an editorial board. And that editorial board is now the custodian of this vocabulary. And I mention these names and these dates because they are the folks who really did the hard work of actually creating and the ongoing work of maintaining the vocabulary as an ongoing project of their editorial board. I came to Homosaurus when it was already pretty well fully formed, but also the best thing that the Library of Congress subject headings could do was describe something as man-woman relationships. And this vocabulary worked to expand that. It now also has a full Spanish translation. And even though some of the words have a LCSH exact match, which they do note as part of the record, with those terms existing in both LC and Homosaurus, I was starting to wonder how important it was to have an additional vocabulary for this, but the events of the past week have reconvinced me that an independent thesaurus is essential. I will just give one little caveat about the Homosaurus as a whole. It grew up in archives and academic settings, so it has the capacity to describe things that you may not have in your average public library circulating collection. But the beauty of a thesaurus is that you don't have to use every single term in order to get the value added benefit of having an additional vocabulary. I'm highlighting the Homosaurus here because that's what I've worked with, but there are many other vocabularies out there that aim to complement the vocabularies that already exist by expanding the terminology available to the cataloger. I believe Spark has also loaded a woman's thesaurus, and I'm aware there exists like an African Studies thesaurus, which adds terms for hundreds of ethnic groups and languages and political parties that are relevant to African history and current sociological studies. And was it you, Katie, who added the slides at the end with other vocabularies?
Gotta find my mute button. I did not. So thank you to someone on our panel, or it may have been Carol. Oh, thank you, Carol. Yes, I was gonna say it seemed Carol-y to me, and it's just very detailed one. So,
Yes.
yes,
Thank
we
you,
do
Carol.
have a ton of links at the very end, and these slides will be available ASAP. Or Jennifer has them already, so Jennifer can put them up. Thank you. And we can talk as much as people want, and Jennifer will talk a little bit in her slides about the technical side of implementing this, but I will say that Homosaurus itself was not a difficult lift. to do the implementation. So it was their editorial board and website does a really good job of making sure that the records are kind of ready to go.
Yeah, thanks, Katie, and thank you, Carol, for adding those links. I do have here a few screenshots of what it's like to navigate the thesaurus website. Like Katie said, it's a beautiful website. Starting out with the wonderful term gender euphoria here. If you go to the next slide here, you see what you'll see if you scroll down a little bit, which is that every single term has a description or kind of a scope note, which is incredibly helpful. It's also a hierarchical vocabulary. So if you could go to the next slide, you'll see often related terms, narrower terms, broader terms, in order to help you navigate the entirety of the vocabulary. The terms drawn from the homosaurus can sit right alongside other vocabularies. If you could go to the next slide. And you simply need to add in the source code in the subfield 2 there of homo-it. I've been coding them both as subject headings and genre terms. If you wanted to get really creative, I suppose that you could try them out in the 386 field for creator or contributor characteristics. I haven't really worked with that, but I imagine it could be done. One of the reasons I sought to have the homosaurus added as one of the vocabularies within Spark's instances of Evergreen is to have the opportunity to validate the terms, adding that little mark so that the subject heading clearly belongs in the record and that it should be retained, as well as the fact that the editorial board is very active and they are consistently improving the vocabulary. So while terms are pretty stable across versions, they do get new relations, and version 4 has the Spanish translations, so that can be incorporated with the validated links. One of the major challenges to introducing a new vocabulary is finding records that can benefit from enhancement with the new vocabulary. One strategy is to run subject heading reports for common broader terms in order to catch records that already have some subject headings but could use some more. A keyword search may be a little bit more thorough since it catches terms used in summaries which don't have representations in the existing subject headings. If your library does Pride Month displays, you can try to get a list of those books and specifically enhance those records. Unfortunately, another good list to look at is the list of most frequently banned books that might benefit from some subject heading enhancement. This project is an ongoing process. So whenever I see new books coming in, I'll take a few moments to add subject headings so that going forward, the catalog has that enhancement. I think ready for Matthews. Oh, here showing. Yep. Okay.
Thanks so much, Jacob. And this is just a note for our authorities discussions in June, but we have version 3 loaded right now, I think. So we need to look at the version 4 updates, especially for those Spanish language headings, which I believe you will be talking more about at another presentation later today. And next up, we're going to talk about the 200s. Matthew Jaquith from Springfield City Library.
Yes, thank you very much. Am I coming through okay? Great, great. Yes, I'm coming from Springfield, Massachusetts, about 90 miles west of Boston, and my consortium is an Evergreen user, so it's great to be part of this project. What I have prepared for you is a brief talk to introduce OCLC's optional arrangement for classifying the Dewey 200s, the religion section. The religion section was born, of course, in the 1880s, along with the rest of the Dewey Decimal Classification. It's in version 23 right now, and the standard version has some limitations that don't reflect our current bibliography, our current users, and the revisions are meant to address those two things. By doing so, they've created a more user-friendly arrangement, something that allows for enhanced discovery and ease, as well as much greater representation of world's peoples and world's religions. So thank you for advancing to the second slide. What we have here is a recap of the current 200 class. The first two divisions, 2XX and 21X, reflect generalities, and that's not unusual for a Dewey class to have the generalities coming in at the beginning. But then after those two divisions, you start breaking into something a little pinpointy. You go right to the Bible, and the full 220s are dedicated to the Bible, and then Christianity begins in the 230s. So of the 10 divisions, the 230s through the 280s, my blue shaded section should have actually included the 230 as well, I beg your pardon. The 230s to the 280s reflects Christianity. Now, when one reflects on the 1880s and what Melville was doing, that's really not that surprising. He was devising a classification system for Amherst College to organize those materials, and that, of course, was in the business, in part, of preparing young men of need for the ministry, the Protestant ministry. So it's not surprising that what he came up with for his project reflected a very Christian-centric perspective. But we're 120 years later. OCLC and others have done a wonderful job in updating the Dewey Decimal System over the years. Think of the 300s and the 700s, the revisions we've seen there. But the 200s have been a little static and haven't benefited from as much growth. So though this is not an exact duplicate of what Melville did, it reflects very strongly back to that original creation. After the 280s, in the standard Dewey Decimal 23 version, we have the 290s, and that's where everything else is. Aside from your generalities, aside from your Bible, and aside from Christian doctrines that discuss Christianity, you have it lumped into the 290s, which would include religious expressions as diverse as Judaism, Confucianism, Taoism, Scientology, Baha'i Faith, Islam. All of it is in the 290s. So what are some of the problems with that? What are some of the challenges that are there? From just a sort of a person view, from somebody who's experiencing this new, it has a sort of afterthought, a sort of a suggestion that could be off-putting. We think of it as, well, my goodness, this whole arrangement assumes Christianity is at the center, but what about all those other faiths that are represented by the people that come to our buildings that are looking for service as afterthoughts? So there's that sort of social feeling that's not quite right, and not what we as librarians strive to do by supporting all of our users in an equitable manner. There are other more practical problems with it that start to bubble to the surface. For example, if you put a lot of topics in a small numerical range, you have to subdivide very far and very deep into the decimal system in order to get the differentiation and distinctions that you would want number to number. In other words, the numbers in the 290s, if you go with the full expression, are very long. And that gets awkward and unwieldy for reference librarians, for people that are new to the system and they're transcribing numbers, for pages, and of course for the public who just want their item. They don't want to be thinking an awful lot about unscrambling awkward Dewey Decimal call numbers. The other problem in addition to that is the flow seems a little off. The shelf flow seems not right, in that the browsing experience is bizarre. You have in the 290s materials that often don't have great relation. So their shelf mates don't have the most obvious pairing next to each other. Consider, for example, Scientology and Confucianism. How much do they have in common other than their religious expressions? To have them clustered so close isn't a particularly user-friendly way to encourage discovery, to find like items, and to enhance the browsing experience. So all of those problems, next slide please, prompted OCLC, after years of study, mining a WorldCat database, doing all sorts of studies that involve recognizing which religions are growing, which religions have a larger number of adherents, what bibliographies within the religion section are expanding. all of those aspects encouraged them to come up with a new arrangement, which is represented here in this slide. And that new arrangement redistributes the real estate, the Dewey call number real estate, so those areas that are growing at a faster rate get a greater percentage, a bigger slice of the pie, and those places that are not growing at the same rate would perhaps get less. It also introduces two other enhancements that make the user's experience really quite wonderful. And those are represented in the shelf flow column, the third column from the left, where it mentions the point that the new flow continues to start with generalities at the beginning, but instead of moving to Bible right in the 240s, it goes back in time to antiquity and starts charting the oldest religions first. And in addition to that timeline, oldest to most recent, left to right, smallest number to largest number, it also spans the globe in an east to west direction. So the oldest materials and the smallest numbers in the 200s start in the Far East, and then they move across the globe to the Middle East, to the Mediterranean, to Northern Europe, to the Sub-Sahara Africa, then across the ocean, of course, to the Americas, etc. That allows the user, when they're in the shelf range, to have the instructive experience, the immersive experience of seeing history unfold in front of them, and allows the user to have shelf mates grouped in a much more likely way, so more like items appear on the shelf near one another. So there's our new flow going from generalities to the oldest, and then across the globe. Bible comes a little later into the 240s, etc. The next slide, please, recaps some of what I've just said, that by building this by building on these principles of classification and guidelines, OCLC has improved in these certain ways, such as improving browsing, such as making more user-friendly call numbers, and for the person who's not thinking about all sorts of library technical things, it just makes them feel better as they're better represented in the material arrangement we present to them. It enhances social equity. So the next slide, please, will allow you to explore this more on your own. The Lawrence Public Library out in Kansas, as far as we can tell, was the first to adapt this new arrangement, the optional arrangement, and their experience is charted in the first link. Simmons University did something similar, and their work is in the second link. And perhaps most helpfully, the third link, the project packet, gives you all the tools you need in order to introduce this project in your library. It is a very simple and inexpensive project that quite literally is as easy as printing out a 3-page spreadsheet, finding the old call number, and the corresponding call number is in the column right to the right of that, which allows you to add the new call number onto your items. The heavy lifting has been done by OCLC by doing the mapping, and then the Kansas Public Library very nicely provided this project packet, which we relied on in Springfield and made the project a real snap. My email is there, as is Emily's email out in Kansas, and both of us would be very happy to hear from you should you have questions about any explorations and implementation ideas. So thank you very much for your time, and I very happily pass the baton on to our next presenter.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I was so excited when Carol brought this up, that this was something that you were doing, because I think it is pretty achievable for most folks looking at their local collection, but really impactful, as you said. So thrilled to hear about that. We're going to hear next, and I'm so excited that Carol is with us. Welcome, Carol. And her slides are up in a minute, but first we're going to hear from Jennifer Weston from Equinox, and she's going to talk a little bit about some of the software-y bits.
Thank you, Katie. And I would much prefer to continue listening to Matthew and Jacob about their projects, because I don't really have a project to discuss today. Instead, I'm really here a little bit in my wearing my hat of an Equinox product and education manager, but also my hat as the cataloging interest group facilitator, one of, because we have a great organizing committee, many of whom are here today. But I really want to talk about some of the things you can do if you really do not have the capacity to take on a large project, or perhaps you're not an OCLC member, that you're not really paying for the privilege of OCLC to be able to take advantage of some of these great things that Matthew was just talking about. Um, I always get ahead of myself. I do want to say that one of the most important things is sharing your projects, what you are doing. And so many thanks to everybody that's on this panel today. Thank you, Katie, for making this possible for us to have these conversations. And really my hope, and when we get to the panel discussion, that's going to be my hope, is that we continue to be able to provide a venue for being able to share this information. So I just have a couple of notes, they're not quite tips and tricks because there's nothing tricky about it, but some things that you can do if you really can't take on a big project, either for lack of support from, a library administration or from just simple time. And we all know that time is fluid and goes by so quickly, but if you really can't take on the kinds of projects that we've been watching for the last few years, reparative and even just alternatives, like being able to implement home source, some of the things you can do is just create a local thesaurus, and that can start as easy as just adding one term to your own local collection there. So even if you do not do authority records, and I'm going to talk a little bit about authority records, let me stop here and put in a little plug. Hackfest tomorrow at 11 a.m. we will be leading an authorities workshop, so we will be talking a lot more about how authorities actually work in Evergreen. So I'm not going to show any of that today, but so if you're interested in an authority setup, let us know. But one of those things is going to be how to create a local thesaurus. The lovely thing about local thesaurus is you don't have to talk to anybody else and get their vocabularies, because while Carol has shared some great slides there at the end of this presentation, and Jacob and Matthew have talked about some of the alternative vocabularies that are out there, you can create your own. And one of the nice things about that is often we have local needs either to represent our communities because they're not represented in the traditional vocabularies, no matter how many alternative options there are. We have local authors. We want to just say things about, I live in Pilot Mountain, North Carolina, and if I want to say something about the squeeze box, which happens to be a diner, there's not an authority record out there. I mean, I need to just create that so that if we're writing histories about that or collecting, memorabilia about that, that I need to be able to reference the squeeze box. So you can use it for local content. The other thing you can do is it can be a tiny little way to start reparative and inclusive language if you don't have the ability to just really take on a whole project for updating all your whole catalog and going through in a holistic approach. Just throw in a term. The important thing about doing this in an organized and structured manner, though, because we're all catalogers, we like organization and structure when we talk about authority records, is really remembering the benefits of doing this. Again, even if you don't have authority records anywhere else, creating a local thesaurus allows you to create consistency, it allows you to report on things, and it improves discoverability. So if I put in cataloger resistance as a subject term, as I just did on my test database, what I'm able to do then is continue to use that tag on other bib records, and then all the facets you see, whether it be in the Evergreen OPAC or if you have a discovery layer, this is how they all come back to the same authority record. They all get linked, your bib records get linked, and you can create your own terminology. This is one of the lovely things about a local thesaurus. I just wanted to show a little bit there. If you see the 7 in the second indicator, there, that tells you it's a local thesaurus. Then you have to have this little 2 subfield. And I promise that's as techie as I'm going to get about authority records now. But that 7 says check the 2 subfield, and the 2 tells you which vocabulary you're using. And obviously this is the vocabulary just for the event going on this week for the Evergreen ILS 2025 conference. So again, it's a really simple structure. And we will be talking more about how to set all of this up. But you can do this yourself without having to even submit a support ticket to your local admin, because you can set up all your thesaurus straight. If you have permissions to do admin level work in Evergreen, you can do this yourself through the staff interface. One of the things I'll talk about when we get to the panel is if we create local work like this, one of the things that we can do as a community is share our work. So if we're putting together vocabularies that are existing outside of something like Homosaurus or the various different great projects that OCLC has going on, we can do that. We can export these in their simple MARC records for authority records. We can start a collection of them to share. Okay, so next slide. So then I know a couple of us have talked about validation. That's also one of the nice things about using authority records. However, Sometimes validation can also be quite frustrating in Evergreen if we're all being honest. Again, we'll talk more about that at the Authorities Hackfest. I wanted to put in that really quick little snippet of a screenshot there. On the Enhanced Mark Editor, if you're not familiar, there's a validate button. I also refrained from giving you the nice little, actually, you know what, let's go back. Katie, if you'll go back a slide. See how it's kind of red pinkish there? This is what happens if you hit that validate button. You see that little exclamation mark in a circle that says it did not validate and something needs to happen. So this is what happens if you do that. And then from there, if you create that authority record, we'll walk through the workflows at Authority Fest, but you could just create it. But that's what happens with validate. Okay, back to the other slide. I was going to say I tried to refrain from giving the alert of red on the slide, but I remembered I did do that. Okay, so if you validate, again, part of the functionality here is it's only checking your database. It's not going out to check Library of Congress. It's not checking Homosource. It's not looking at any of these valid vocabularies that are out there. It's just saying, do you have an authority record in the database that matches this thing that is on your bib record? It is also checking for the entire string that is on this record. So if you kind of look down there at the bottom where I had that 650, you've got your subdivisions, there's your design, but the subdivisions there give you the geographical, you've got England, and you've got history, and giving you your time frame there. All that subdivision, to actually validate, you have to have an authority record that says 650A design, Z, England, H, history, 19th century. If we're doing this technically correct, notice the sarcasm in my voice, if we're doing this technically correct, you would actually have 4 entries, 4 authority records in the Evergreen database to make this work, so that any variation of these things would validate. So one of the things we can do is we can define what is being validated in Evergreen. You don't have to just accept that little red thing pops up and then you continue just add all these strings all you want to. You can actually turn off the validation, or in the definition, simply not include those subdivisions. Now, this is a professional decision. It's one you have to make. I actually hesitated a little bit. And we talked about it in the cataloging group and in the authorities working group. Do we share this tip and trick? Yeah, we do, because you really do want to validate to make sure that you haven't misspelled design. I mean, that's part of your validation, is to make sure that you are using commonality there. But you can turn off so that when you hit that validate button, it simply looks at the A subfield. You take out the definition of the Z and the X and the Y. You can talk, and you do this per tag. So you'd have to do it on the 650 and then do it on the series validations, as Jessica just mentioned there. You could leave it in place for author, name, title, all those uniform ones if you want, but then the subject headings, the series headings, you can do this again tag by tag. This is not in stock Evergreen. It is something you would have to do library by library, and it is something that has to be done at the consortial level if you belong to a consortium. So again, you can change the validation. We will have documentation, talk more about that at the Authorities Workfest, and all of that will be shared. Just an idea that if you really do want to use validation, you find that it's just so frustrating, you feel like, what's the point? Some days there's a way around that so that you can get a benefit from the validation functionality that is built in. And then lastly, for me, next slide, I want to talk a little bit about community. Because while with our individual vendors, we have conversations about authority control. We also know the size of the number of vendors supporting authority control is getting smaller and smaller. So as we find ourselves needing to ask questions about how can I make changes to the vocabularies that are being used, how can I implement alternative vocabularies, the most important thing to do is to stay connected. And even a year ago, I would have said that, but certainly now in these times, it's so very important to find the stories, to share the stories. And if you have not joined the list of the Evergreen Cataloging Interest Group, it's a good place to start. And again, there's the link. It's actually the new link. If you were having trouble with the list in the last month or so, this is the brand new version of that. So there you go. And we will make that available. Or I will, after I stop talking, I will put it in chat there. But beyond sharing, and again, I've got a few comments when we get to the panel about my wish is that even after today, we can take the resources that you've all shared and we find a home for them on the Evergreen Cataloging Interest Group wiki, which I should have linked there, but the wiki has a place that we can just simply share your projects, share your history, share all the materials that Carol has put together for us there on the last couple of slides, and just really put together our own collection of the things that we're seeing, even if we haven't implemented yet projects that you've talked about, but just if you found some really good things that are inspiring to you. So I just have two things that I wanted to share, or resources that have been inspiring to me. One of them is the cataloging lab. If you're not familiar with Violet Fox, she has been just a powerhouse in the cataloging world. And I left her a little note there that her goal is to create a community of people who care about the ethics of classification and cataloging. In a large part, that's what this particular panel is about. And so I encourage you to look at the cataloging lab. She's got so many really great resources that are there. And I've got a link even to her own webpage there where she talks about her history. And she continues to have these conversations. And then the last one that is on that slide, and then I will hand things over to Carol. But my last little note there is if you are on Facebook, and if you're not familiar with the Troublesome Catalogers and Magical Metadata Fairies, it's a really great community, sharing a lot of what's going on in individual libraries and asking really great questions. So while I don't often promote Facebook as a creditable resource, this is an exceptional group. So I would encourage that if you are interested. So that's it for my tips and tricks about how to get connected and a couple of things you can do in Evergreen. And I am thrilled to turn things over to Carol.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. And sorry for the slide chaos there. I forgot that even if I'm clicking on the left side of the page, it keeps advancing. And there are, I know a bunch of us are on the AutoCAT list, and there is another one that's run out of Georgia's higher ed system that I'm completely blanking. Is it Credicat or is it
Radical Cataloger?
Radical Cataloger. Radcat. Thank you.
I was going to mention that one.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well,
I'm glad I can be heard at least too.
Carol's subject. So those are also great resources and places to hang out with other catalogers. So next up, we have Carol, and this I know is a project that many of us have undertaken, but I love the tie-in with your strategic plan, and we'll love to hear more about it.
All right, thank you. Well, glad to be here, finally. And I will say that this project started prior to my arrival at CWMAR's office. So it was Janet Schrader who was, I think, who kicked it off, really. So kudos to her. So yes, we had a cataloging project for illegal aliens subject heading. So that began over the course of 2021 and ended in 2022. So we replaced the subject headings for illegal aliens and aliens with undocumented immigrants and non-citizens, respectively. And as it says, the project fit within our strategic action plan, one of which was embrace the core values of equity, diversity, and inclusion in all libraries, review existing network policies for any bias, and encourage member libraries to do the same. So, also kudos to Springfield for their work on that. And next slide, please. So I'm going to give a timeline. And again, I wasn't here for a lot of this. So to start, CAT Center staff, so that was Janet and Amy Constantino, one of our full-time staff, watched a short documentary called Change the Subject, which was by Dartmouth College students, and their work on petitioning the Library of Congress to change the subject heading for illegal aliens to something less divisive. And I've found that, they started talking about doing that. I found a document from like 2016, and it still hadn't been done. So in May, Janet Schroeder, it should be Schrader. Oh, well, that will be fixed. Attends a Backstage Library Works webinar, and they are one of the authority vendors, and they're the one that we use at CWMARS. And that was on using local authority records to replace derogatory headings such as illegal aliens and aliens, among others, like some indigenous terms. And so C.W. Myers obtained a quote to have approximately 1,200 bibliographic records changed that included those subject terms. And so next slide, please. So Bibliographic Committee meeting was arranged to discuss this, and they all voted in favor. And also the libraries that we have that have extensive government document collections also approved, because of course being federal and state bibliographic records, that affects them. So if they weren't on the committee, they gave their approval as well. Now we also have a social justice subcommittee, which is not a part of it's not subcommittee of the Bibliographic Committee. It's just called subcommittee because it doesn't fit into any particular official committee in our organization structure. So it's separate. So the Bibliographic Committee presented a draft proposal to them, and they voted in favor of it as well. So then the Executive Committee met in August to vote in favor of changing the subject headings based on the recommendations of those two, and the quote was approved. And next slide, please. And then in November 21, the Library of Congress announced their decision to replace the terms aliens and illegal aliens with non-citizens, and also added illegal immigration for those who did not comply with legal requirements. So the undocumented immigrants subject heading that we came up with was not actually authorized. And it should note that some don't agree that non-citizens is appropriate, just because most people are citizens of a country, even if not the United States. But of course, Library of Congress, that's the default, and any non-citizens of other countries have a subdivision for the country. And yes, so for example, I'm a non-citizen according to the United States, but I'm a citizen of Canada. So, but the records scope note states in part, here are entered works on persons who are not citizens of the country in which they reside. So that kind of covers that in their eyes. The next slide, please. So we continued, and in December, the records processed by Backstage were loaded into Evergreen, and that might have been thought the end of the project. However, with our quarterly updates due to conflicting authority records, the authority linking changed the updated terms back to the old headings. So work did begin on removing those and then relinking and reindexing as needed. But of course, this was also around the time that Janet retired, and it wasn't until the end of March that I started. So the project was paused for a bit, and then once I got into the flow of things here, I finished updating those terms. And do I have another? Yeah, so yeah, it didn't go too badly. Like, a lot of the work was done, so it was a lot of cleanup. And so now in Evergreen, we do have some that have the Library of Congress terms and some that have ours, and I occasionally have to go back and try and get those together, clean them up, because authority work never ends. And I think that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carol. So we do have some full panel commentary, and I included several questions here. We don't have a ton of time, I feel like has been said during every session of this conference. I did want to just give a quick preview of some of the resources that Carol put in here, and we can make sure that we've grabbed everything that we talked about today and that it's in this list. But we do have a ton of interesting resources here, and there's a lot of cool work going on in the cataloging community right now around these topics. So these are some good resources, and there are a lot more. I will give people an opportunity to either put questions in the chat, or if anybody wants to unmute and talk with us for a little bit, that would be fine as well. And then in the meantime, I'm going to start with this question for the panel, because it's the one that I most wanted to have answered, and that is to see from people, either what is next on your list, or what would you love to do regardless of whether or not you have the resources or the control or the stakeholder buy-in to do it. So what's next for folks?
Well, CW Mars is starting to have discussions about what to do overall about recent Library of Congress changes to subject headings.
Mm-hmm.
And a Bibliographic committee meeting I had in, I think it was January, I said, well, this is likely to be happening with some terms, and we've done it before, so we could do it again. But they want to come up with an official process and procedure for it, because it's not just the first 2 terms, it's going to be ongoing.
Yeah, and I see someone has had, Jessica Efren from SLNC has had questions about when they are going to make those updates to the newly updated geographical heading names. I know, for us, even for changes that we want to have decided that we want to make, we do processing quarterly, and it often takes us more than a quarter to figure out what we want to do. So it's certainly a long tail on that process. Other folks on the panel have things that they are planning to do or planning to discuss in the near future? Go ahead. You're muted, Matthew. Oh, Matthew, I think you're trying to talk, but you're muted.
I have the capacity to mute him, but not unmute him. So I am of no help.
No. Everybody is adjusting to a different platform. All right. So Matthew, we would love to hear from you if you can figure out how to turn your mic back on. In the meantime, I'm going to see if anybody has started using the 385, 386 fields. I think, Jacob, you were talking about starting to do this, but we haven't done it yet. Other folks who may want to do that, or is anybody using those?
I think one of the questions there is, are they indexed? So even if you start using them, are they going to be presented in any way that's useful for discovery? So I think that's one of the things that I want to look at, is if we start seeing these new fields, what is Evergreen doing with them?
That is a good question. Oh, interesting. And some people are seeing, Carol is noting that some of those geographical, if you do automated processing, if LOC changes, the headings, then your headings are going to change unless you specifically intervene. So sometimes that's good, and most of the time that's what we want, but some of the time it's not what we want. So that is a good note that you do have to most of that, at least for us, happens kind of, without our intervention, and so it would be easy to not think about how those schedules, yeah, they need to have some resistance movements in order to make changes, especially for things that the Library of Congress has gone ahead and changed.
Katie, any last words before we free up this room to the next session?
Not for me. If any of the panelists want to say anything else, thank you everybody so much for hanging out with me. And these discussions will absolutely continue in the cataloging committee. So come hang out. It's a good time.
Thanks again for pulling us together, Katie.
Thank you. All right.